And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, and Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. And Noah began to be an husbandman, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine, and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment, and laid it upon both their shoulders, and went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servant shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sapta, and Rama, and Saptika. And the sons of Rama, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Eresh, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Ashur, and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah, and reason between Nineveh and Calah. The same is a great city. And Mizraim begat Ludim, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Naphtuhim, and Paphrusim, and Casluhim, out of whom came Philistim, and Caphtorim. And Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. And afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, unto Gaza, as thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, even unto Lasha. These are the sons of Ham, after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their nations. Greetings, salut, hola, and lafia. Welcome to Biblio-Apologetics, a hub for seeing biblical truth in history, geography, anthropology, apologetics, and logic. When I was in Bible college in the United States, one day a preacher was preaching, and he mentioned how Africans are the descendants of Ham. Shortly after the class, several of my Filipino classmates came to me and said, "Did you hear that? You come from Ham and are cursed. We are the descendants of Shem and are from the same line as Jesus Christ." These words are damaging and have kept many Africans from the Christian faith. Besides the widespread misconception that Jesus Christ was a white man with blue eyes and long blonde hair, although in his humanity Jesus Christ was from the Middle East, which borders Africa and is far from Europe, racism and prejudice are alive and well in Christian churches around the world. What we do know is that the Bible does not put an emphasis on the skin color and does not explicitly say this particular people with this particular color of skin come from this particular forefather. Although Cush was an ancient kingdom in sub-Saharan Africa, and there might be a hint of truth in that some sub-Saharan Africans could be descendants of Ham, assuming that a particular so-called race comes from a particular ancestor is often fallible and is underlined by racial prejudice and bias. Some of these racist teachings taught in Christian churches contributed to evil practices such as slavery, segregation, colonization, and neo-colonization. So then the question remains, are all Africans descendants of Ham and are cursed? The African continent's history has been stolen by the West, and the continent continues to be raped, not just in terms of its natural resources, but its culture and history as well. Despite the continued extensive effort of some Europeans to erase the traces of Sub-Saharan Africa's ties to ancient Egypt, the Bible can be used to utterly refute the claim that the African continent lacks a millennia-old history. We do know that the broad nose of the Sphinx was cut off because he looked like a black man, and the DNA of most mummies reveal that most of the pharaohs, especially the early ones, were black men. There are also linguistic similarities between the language of the ancient Egyptians and that of African languages as far as Senegal and Mali. The cultural genocide of Africa is so extensive that a lot of my friends in the United States did not even know that Egypt is in Africa and that there are more pyramids in Sudan than Egypt. We do know from history that Egypt was conquered by Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Rome, and the Ottoman Empire, etc. Thus, we should expect the Islamic faith and the modern inhabitants of Egypt to match the last conquerors of the land. Biblically speaking, we know that Abraham, Joseph, Moses, and Jesus Christ, among many other prophets, spent a considerable amount of time in Egypt, and God used ancient Egypt to establish and sustain his chosen nation, Israel. Therefore, claiming that Africans are cursed and do not have a history is untrue. As Africans, we do not claim Rome or Greece as our own and expect others to respect what is ours, instead of having an overly racist and belittling view of black men. Just because Egypt was the world's superpower for a long time does not mean Africans were not its founders. People, including some pastors, sometimes act as if the African continent had no contact with ancient Israel and that European colonization is the only thing that brought biblical knowledge to the continent. Indeed, Europe proper was not explicitly mentioned in the Bible until the New Testament. Great African kingdoms and kings such as Tirharka, king of Ethiopia, in Isaiah chapter 37 verse 9 and 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 9 are mentioned in the Old Testament. We also know that Moses married an African woman according to the book of Numbers chapter 12 and verse 1, and King Solomon was madly in love with a black woman. Moving to the New Testament, we know that the man who carried Jesus' cross was from my country's Chad's neighbor to the north, Libya. We also know that from its onset, Christianity had a strong presence in the continent. Some of the most notable apostles, including Philip, Matthew, and Mark, amongst others, brought the message of Jesus Christ to the continent. Cities such as Alexandria, Egypt, were the epicenter of Christianity and produced many of the early church fathers and scholars. Therefore, the notion that Africa was a dark continent with no tie to ancient Israel and the gospel prior to colonization is simply not true. In fact, the continent had ties with ancient Israel and was in many cases exposed to the gospel before most countries in Europe. It is also worth noting that many Africans, including Ethiopians, Eritreans, and others, share genetic and linguistic kinship with ancient Jews. Languages such as Amharic are classified in the Semitic language group, which include Hebrew and Arabic. The book of Acts speaks of Philip converting an Ethiopian eunuch in the desert. What is notable in the narration is that the Ethiopian eunuch was already a practicing Jew going to Jerusalem to worship. It is important to note that in biblical parlance, the name Ethiopia was used to refer to sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, especially modern Sudan. Therefore, we do know that some Africans share genetic and linguistic kinship with ancient Israel. The biblical narration concerning the line of Shem makes no indication that people such as the Chinese, Filipinos, and Koreans, etc., come from the line of Shem. Although the pattern of migration is mentioned in the Bible, it is merely man's interpretation and injection that categorize a selected group of people as coming from a particular ancestry line. Logically speaking, we would expect some of the descendants of Shem to live in the Middle East and Africa because those locations are close to Israel. There is also prevalent claim that all modern Europeans come solely from the line of Japheth. This is once again man's injection and teaching, derived chiefly from the migration pattern of the descendants of Japheth. We do know that migration patterns kept changing until recently, so it is not easy to pinpoint exactly where a particular group of people originated thousands of years ago. The following are some of the people group the Bible mentions as coming from the line of Ham. The Canaanites, that were the neighbors of ancient Israelites and were constantly at war with them. The Assyrians, that were distant cousins of ancient Hebrews, since Abraham came from Ur, which is in modern Iraq, and had relatives in modern Syria. Sidon, or modern Lebanon. The Jebusites, that inhabited ancient Jerusalem, and the Amorites that lived in modern Jordan. It is evident from the biblical narration that Ham had many sons that up to this day live in different corners of the globe. Therefore, there is no biblical basis to say that only Africans or all Africans are the descendants of Ham. This appears to fit well in the mindset of prejudice and often racist individuals who have a negative view of black men and tend to associate anything negative with the black color and remove any positivity associated with the black color or the African continent. The person who has the unquestionable knowledge about each of us is God, and one thing we share as believers is that we all come from Adam and Eve. It is okay to come from the line of Shem. It is okay to come from the line of Ham. It is okay to come from the line of Japheth, but it is not okay to bring our biases to the Bible. Thank you for watching Biblio-Apologetics. May God bless each and every one of you. And remember, Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven.